Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the AAS Doctoral Student College for this very special event, a live episode of the podcast, This IS Research. I'm Sarah Hönigsberg, co-chair of this year's AMCIS Doctoral Student Corner and current president of the AAS Doctoral Student College. And I'm from Chemnitz University of Technology.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Carol. I'm the co-chair of this year's Doctoral Student Corner and was the past vice president of the Doctoral Student College. Now I'm a faculty member at Northeastern University. So it is our great pleasure to welcome Nick Barentis and Jan Ricker, the host of This Is Research podcast. So just for all the attendants to know, first, we plan to have a lively discussion around conferences and some PhD life with answers to your questions to Nick and Jan. So please post your questions in the QA box, the feature with the QA in it, and not the chat. So that would be very helpful for us throughout the session. Without further ado, please welcome Nick and Jan.
Wait 1 second. Like this is a student event. I'm looking up the participant list. There's Win Chin, who's like the second oldest person that I know. And what's he doing? He's not supposed to be here. He did his PhD in the 80s.
Apparently, we're accepting anybody into these participants. Yeah. All right. Well, welcome. Hey, Recker. So how are you? We took the summer off. This is our first time talking to each other after you took a summer-long holiday.
That's right. Actually, yeah, I'm good. You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel good. I feel good, and it's good to see you guys. It's good to see you, Carol and Sarah. Thanks for the opportunity. I was really excited about this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So now, let's talk about some fun things to get things going. If anybody wants, you can. This is our first live podcast. If anybody wants, I guess, our attention, I don't know, Q&A, put in questions there, or chat. I guess we'll be monitoring both. And I don't know, Carol and Sarah, so you mentioned that there's this Doctoral Student Association or something. Do you want to tell us what's going on with this? Who's a member? I don't know anything about this.
So the Doctoral Student College, it's a forum for PhD students, and we want to help. So it's an AS college. One of
is it when you say a forum? Is it an online forum? Is it something I subscribe to? Do I have to pay dues if I'm a PhD student?
No. So it's one of the 4 colleges of the AS, and the PhD students, I think they're automatically members of this college. So they don't have to pay for anything. They can, of course, we have a forum where they can ask things and write things. But the main thing we're doing is offer mentorship, relationship and career coaching events for them so that they can connect with other PhDs, but also to like senior faculties.
You know what? That is brilliant. I mean, I said this earlier. I mean, I think it's brilliant on 2 counts. And number one, obviously, all the services you provide in terms of coaching, mentoring, networking, hugely important. But also that, the future of IS scholarship has a voice. So I sometimes feel that only the old people have a say, the old white men, and they have their own colleges and the senior scholar groups and all these sorts of things, and the special intergroups. All of these are run by old people more so than young people. So it's really cool that you guys are doing this, unpaid voluntarily, and I'm pretty sure that everyone's pretty receptive of this.
Yeah, and this Doctoral Student Corner is a cool thing because it gives PhD students a place to go and meet other PhD students. Because basically, conferences suck, right? You show up there, you don't know anybody, then you present your paper to 5 people in the room, and then you get really bad feedback. And why does anybody go to conferences? Recker. As a matter of fact, didn't you stop going to conferences at some point?
I did stop. I did stop. I wanted to touch upon this, but a little bit later, because in preparation for this, I remembered my very first conference. Do you remember your first conference? But my first conference is this. It wasn't an AIS conference. It was in 2005, so a long time ago. and it's a different conference here. It's called Conference of Advanced Information System Engineering, KAIS. And I was a first year PhD student, and I was timid. I was afraid. You know what I did? So I went and presented my paper to 3 people, and then I left the building and never came back. That's it. I didn't attend a session. I didn't talk to anyone.
You presented to 3 people?
Yeah, I only had a workshop paper. So I went in on the Saturday before the conference started, and presented that, and got so scared and just literally went out of the building and never came back. So, and afterwards my advisor asked me, how was the conference? And I was like, good, I guess. That was my very first conference.
I didn't know you were so timid. That's ridiculous.
It's an intimidating thing. But now the first main conference was the Australasian conference. So that's the regional IS conference in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh wait, why did you run out?
I was scared, dude.
Scared of what?
Of all the white people like you.
What do you mean? Well, like, what were you afraid they were going to do?
Okay, so since we want to talk about this, so I was in Australia at the time, and the way that it ran, all the conferences were not in Australia, so they all took a lot of money, time, and effort. So how we organized it in our school, multiple people would submit to a conference, and it would basically have a lottery who would be allowed to go. So I had to go and present not only my paper, but also those of my colleagues. So my very first paper that I had to present wasn't my own. It was a paper by 2 postdocs, and they submitted to this really weird ontology and philosophy workshop on Gadamer's view on ontology and stuff. I had no idea. I was so scared. So I went into this little philosophy workshop and presented a paper on why ontology is all bad for people. Said Gadamer, whose book I hadn't read at the time, and so forth, and wouldn't understand anyway. So I did that, got hammered by people that had read more than I had at that time, and then I literally left the building and didn't come back.
Wow.
Did you receive any questions or comments?
Yeah, but I don't remember. Yeah, I did, and I wrote it down because I couldn't answer them, and then and send an email back to the original authors of that paper. But as I said, then I left. It could also be the conference was in Portugal, in Porto. So, I spent the time exploring Porto. That wasn't too bad.
Oh, there you go. But, so you flew from Australia. No, I remember some of those. I remember my first ISIS. I went to sit in the other people's, and I just picked whatever titles were interesting, and I was actually there viewing paper presentations, and I was intimidated for a different reason. I understood virtually nothing that anybody was doing. I was a first year PhD student. I think it was in Seattle, or maybe I was second year. No, it was first year. So it was right then, a couple months after I started the PhD program. I thought I knew a little, and then one paper presentation after another, and I didn't understand the statistics yet. I didn't understand any of it. And I'm just like, what is going on here? What did I get myself involved in? So I was a bit overwhelmed, and I didn't really know which sessions to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. There was like no direction. I don't know. So the beauty of these doctoral student corners, right, is that they give PhD students somewhere to go when they just show up and don't know anyone, right?
Yeah. And you make some friends. I think that's important. Right?
So Carol, did you go as a doctoral student to a doctoral student corner?
Yes, that's actually how I, heard of the corner and got involved. So my first conference with AIS was at AMCIS in 2016. And that was where I met one of the founding members of the college, Jessica Pai, and she's at Arizona now, and so I distinctly remember just going in and kind of wandering the halls and saw her standing there in front of a room. There's always a dedicated room for doctoral students at the conference. So, and then I just said, oh, what is this? I think there was a sign, but that said doctoral students, and I said, oh, I'm a doctoral student. So I went in there, and that's how I met Jessica, and that's how I met some of the other doctoral students as well, and that was very nice because there
I
was
have a question
place.
to you guys,
Yep.
Carol and Sarah, right? I said earlier that there's, I sometimes feel it's like this old man's game and they run the show and they have their own colleges. So one of the manifestations is for a couple of years at AMCIS, they did the Senior Scholar Slam, where every one of the Senior Scholar, about 50, 60, 70 members gets a minute on stage. You can sit and they come up, have a minute to introduce themselves and then sit down. So I always thought that is a weird self-aggrandizing, not even sure what type of gestures it is, but I realized it can be vastly helpful because you put some faces to people's names. Have you ever been to one of these sessions? How is it for doctoral students to go and see some of these people whose paper you have read, and they come on stage and say, hey, guys, this is me, and they usually do some funny skit as well. Have you been to one of these?
I have been to one. I went to the one in ICIS last year, and I was really happy to see it. Honestly, I was kind of in awe because some of them did mention what they have done over the past certain years, and I was in awe how much they were to accomplish. Well, I think it was because especially the ones who maybe played instrument or some other
but isn't this ridiculous? It's like, all right, so I've never been to one of these, but Recker, the way you describe it to me, this is, the only word I can use for it is pathetic. Let's all stroke each other on stage and just get up there and stroke our egos and celebrate each other and our wonderfulness in being senior scholars. That is sad.
Well,
isn't that not sad?
I mean.
That's like, I feel sorry for a community that needs to do that.
So number one, I've never participated as one of the guys. I always decline saying, like, I'm not going to go on stage and say, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to say up there. So that's number one. But at the same time, knowing what it was like to be a doctoral student, how difficult it was just to figure out who everybody was. My first AMCIS was in Milwaukee, and there was 1,700 people, and I knew none of them. Yeah. So, and I had no idea what Detmar Straub looks like or, whoever. So I think it's really helpful for that end. But, they asked me a couple of years ago to participate. I was like, no way in hell am I going to go on
Thank
stage
goodness.
and wave my hand or pick up my guitar or, put up my glasses for that matter and look really smart on stage.
Those look good. I didn't take it as ego stroking, more of like just getting to know them, seeing what else they did, if they had any hobbies like guitar playing. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it might be interesting if we're in this celebrity praising community, right? But isn't it supposed to be? So there is the social element. This is the issue with conferences, right? Is that the intellectual element is actually probably the weaker part, right? People sit around, talk to the social network, I think, is the huge part. The reason I like going to conferences, continue to, is because that's where I catch up with my friends, with my co-authors, with people whose work that I like. And when I was a doctoral student, granted, the senior people didn't want to talk to me. I had nothing really to say to them other than I read your paper, right? What do you need? Well, what it is it's time for you to be around your peers and those people who you will collaborate with, right? And do I really need to know what an important person looks like? Well, not really. As a matter of fact, there's a certain, I don't know, to see someone and be like, hi, I'm Nick Brenti, your name is, right? And you don't know them. And if there's some big celebrity, maybe they could be humbled a little bit by introducing themselves. I don't know. It's too much of a what is it, celebrity culture or something? No?
Well, I think you're being a little bit provocative here. I mean, I actually changed my mind about conferences after, as a doctoral student, I went, and there's a few experiences that were really memorable. I think one of them was my first job talk, these interviews that they do at AMCIS and AMCIS. As a non-American, I had no idea. No one could give me any preparation, and I failed miserably. Because I had no idea what they would do at these things. I don't know whether you guys in the US run any sort of preparation coaching session for a doctoral student. I had none. I put on a suit and I went into these little booth and got blasted. Anyway, so I didn't go for
the good programs do prepare. So at Georgia, when we had students going to present at a conference first, we'd have them present at Case. We did that, and then interview preparation, all of those things. Sarah, you had yourself unmuted. We were talking over you. What were you going to tell us about the before we move on, the senior slam where all the senior scholars get up and introduce themselves.
Yeah, I haven't been to one of these. I just heard that they are very funny, and I know that the PhD students like them. So the ones I talked to, but that is why I didn't really engage, because I haven't seen one. So I guess it's funny, and I think sometimes it helps to know how the people in your field look. I had a fight with someone after a talk about digital transformation, and afterwards I found out that it is a very, very well-known person in the field.
That's okay.
So that
and you should be able to argue with the well-known people in the field. You don't have to defer to them. You might be more up on the topic than they are, you know. Maybe
and I gotta say, like, whenever I met anyone of fame, of name, I mean, you make it out as they're all celebrities, you want to be treated like this. I always found all these guys to be, first of all, fairly humble, very approachable, very nice and gentle, especially to younger folks. So in a way that they sort of, you know, they cherish the moments where they can talk to young, bright scholars and talk to them. So,
all right. So now you accused me of being provocative. Now I'm accusing you of being political, right? Yes.
Saving my ass. Yeah.
I think a lot of very accomplished people are that. They're humble, they're very approachable and wonderful human beings. And I think we have a lot of those folks in our field. And then some accomplished folks are very much egomaniacs and not approachable and like to have their ego stroked. And I've run into those over the years as well. And our field has them, right? So let's not be too unrealistic about our colleagues and the senior folks in our field, right? We have both types.
I'm pretty sure that people say the same thing about the two of us too, to be honest.
You in particular.
Yeah.
All right. Can I read you a comment that we had from, I guess, one of the listeners? His name's Jason Killoran, I guess. He's a PhD student looking to use theories. He stumbled upon a model he thought we'd be interested in. Previous episodes, we've discussed the evolution of digital technologies. But have you considered the technology acceptance model?
Yeah, that's very nice.
This guy's a joker.
I mean, I think there's a renaissance. Wait, I can't wait for TAM 8 to come out. It's in its making, I'm sure. Hey, look, guys, in all seriousness, I wanted to come back to something you said earlier, which is the story of why I didn't go to conference for a few years, which is true. And these happen to be sort of my assistant prof years, so sort of postdoc, early faculty days. And, went to conference beforehand, sort of around my PhD and sort of the year after. And then I decided not to, because I thought, well, what am I wasting my time with conferences? So all these papers take time. And you can literally spend your entire year hopping from one deadline to the next. Yeah. So February is AMCIS, early May is ICIS, July is Higgs, October is ACIS. So, all year long, every 3 months, you can write up a little 10 pages about something, and and then you can go to these conferences, but it doesn't give you enough time to work on the big ideas and the big papers and so forth. So I thought, right, great. The currency back then seemed to become journal papers. So I'm just going to do that. So I didn't go to any major conference. No, ACIS and ICIS, these were the big ones in my region anyway, for about 4 or 5 years. And in hindsight, that was a horrible decision. That was a really bad idea that I had, right? Because I wrote papers and I published journal papers and so forth. And I tell you, no one knew me. Not a single person in the world knew me, even though I wrote all these papers and they appeared in all the journals most of them in the journals that I wanted them to be. And, I was sitting there thinking like, hey, I'm never being asked to even do a review, let alone become an editor, let alone be in any of the community stuff, right? So I wasn't invited to be a mentor at a DC or speak at a panel or, all these other things that we do. And I said, how come? And the reality is that no one knew me, right? So people have to get to know you, the person, the individual behind the papers, then they have to come to know you, they have to come to like you, and then they remember you. They remember, oh, that's the guy. He was a kind of nice guy, sort of maybe smart or not, and he works on these things. I'm going to ask him or her, right? So from then on, I made sure that every year I would go to ICIS, and I've done ever since, and I'll continue to do that because I think it's really important because, it's a social community. That's really what it is. And, if no one knows you and if no one likes you, then you're really, really left alone.
I agree. And I think your first step is your cohort, right? I know oftentimes people want to go talk to, say, senior people or whoever and try to build a relationship. And it's really hard to, especially cold. If your advisor introduces you to one of their buddies that's a senior person or something like that, then that works, of course. And then you can get into those discussions. But usually it's your cohort, right? Like if you look at you and me, right? You maybe got your PhD a year or two before I did. But, Stefan is our mutual friend. We had these mutual collaborators, and then we ended up meeting each other at a or ISIS. I don't know. Maybe it was the ISIS, right, in Texas, where you and I met. And then that's what happens. Your cohort, the people in a few years above and below you, you end up seeing, you have drinks with them. And that's another thing I see young people do sometimes. They'll go to these conferences and they don't go necessarily to the receptions. They don't go out to, say, a big dinner with a bunch of people. And that's really the thing, because what happens is you get your dinner group, you go to lunch with some people, you go to drinks with some people. Even if you don't drink, you just go to hang out. And then there's your cohort, and then your cohort introduces you to people, and then you meet people at about your level of seniority. But then through that network, you meet more senior people and students, and you just grow your network kind of organically that way. I think it doesn't have to be that directed in the sense that it's, I need to meet this person for a professional reason. But what ends up happening is you create all these social relationships, and then the professional things, either directly or indirectly emerge over the years of seeing people repeatedly. So I think that's the value of these conferences. To me, the number one value are those social relationships.
Absolutely. And you know what, one of the implications for me is I'm not going to write a full paper anymore. Very rarely do I write full 20-something page papers for ISIS. I give you the 7-pager. So number one, that's an entry ticket. But number two, that's really, I like these poster sessions way better. Because you have more direct personal interactions, and every now and then you actually get to talk to the people next to you. That rarely ever happens in one of these paper sessions where someone goes up.
Oh, you like poster sessions? See, the thing with poster sessions is you're standing in front of your poster.
Yeah, and you have ample time to talk to people.
Yeah.
Well, it's better than the paper session where I'm talking with a session chair who holds up these little signs, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1, and he has prepared 2 questions because no one else has.
But every once in a while you get those sessions that have 40 people in them, so every once in a while it's like 1 out of every 3 or 4 of your papers, a couple of them are just the other presenters and it's at a horrible time, 8:00 in the morning. And it's like, but then every once in a while you get those. As a matter of fact, Brian Pentland saw my presentation at an AOM during my PhD, and then he invited me up to Michigan State to present because of it.
Wow.
So every once in a while you do a presentation where people are actually paying attention and in the room. It's just the majority of the time it doesn't happen, right? Sarah, what were you going to say? You were going to say something about posters?
Oh, I was.
That was Carol.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've done a poster, and yeah, I think definitely the level of engagement with the audience was a bit higher for poster session, because you're standing there for almost an hour. Yeah. And people will come and talk to you and about your research, or maybe not even, and get to know you, versus the couple of minutes you have for the Q&A, and unless you kind of follow up with someone afterwards, then that's a little bit more challenging. But so yeah, the level of social engagement for poster is higher. I would agree with that one. But
and I would argue, if I were a PhD student and didn't know anyone and I was doing a poster presentation, I could meet the other PhD students and maybe say, hey, do you want to grab a drink after this? I wouldn't be afraid of doing that, because oftentimes the other PhD students don't have anyone to grab a drink with anyway. And if you don't happen to drink, well, say, sure, I'll go with you and drink a Coke or something, or a water. You don't have to actually drink alcohol, although it's the great social lubricator. All right.
I think,
so
I think it's really true that you get a lot of feedback at posters. It's very difficult with normal presentations. And it's the worst situation if you stand in front of the audience and no one has a question, and you'd have this 15 minutes discussion and you're like, okay, no one asked something. And
Sarah, did that happen to you?
Yeah, that happened to me once with my first presentation.
It happens to everybody.
Yeah,
it happens to everybody, but part of it is our fault, because we have to actually present what we did, and then we spend a lot of time on the method and a lot of time, and people they can read the paper. I think I would challenge you in your presentations is to provoke a little bit, right? Really focus on motivating what you did and really focus on implications. And then people will ask questions, clarifying your method and whatever they'll do. But yeah, if you spell out your method so much, then they'll think, oh, I'm not sure if they covered this or not. So,
yeah, fully.
So wait, we have another question. Katsiarina. What if you have a paper that's already submitted to a journal? Should you present it at a conference? Oh, this is an easy answer, because it shows more of your work. Or should you submit a paper that's earlier stage in development because it needs more feedback? How important is the conference presentation when you are on the job market? Ooh.
These are really good. Well, several questions. So the first one is an easy one. So if you submit a paper to a journal, you can't submit it anywhere else. That's the simple answer.
Never,
right?
period.
Because it's being under considered for publication, and if it gets accepted, then you get the copyright and so forth. So don't do that, right? Don't do that. Number one, it's not allowed. Number two, actually people notice. The community of people that review papers for journals and conferences are largely overlapping, and they're very small. There's very few people, whatever it is that you're doing, that actually know your subject matter. So you always get the same reviews anyway. So, and that could be a problem, right? Do it the other way around, of course, because the original idea for conferences were, of course, that people would come and show what they're working on at the moment, get some feedback while they're working on it. And then, the final research, the final result of the study, you would go and read in a paper anyway, right? So that was the original idea, I suppose, for conferences. And for a long time, conferences didn't have proceedings or full papers. You would submit it, and some conferences still do. You submit an abstract and say, that's what I'm working on. Okay, you come in and do a presentation and we'll learn about it. You don't have to write an 8-page paper for that. We'll figure out if it's good. We'll figure it out when we read the full journal paper.
And that's the thing that you want to. So what this Katsiarina, what this strikes me as is I'm presenting myself. And, no one wants to see you present yourself. Maybe if you're on the job market, they might, some future employer might want to go watch you present, I suppose. But they're probably not going to be judging your research. They're going to be presenting, they're going to be judging how you present something. They'll look at what kind of teacher you would be, what kind of person you would be, right? They'll judge your research probably by reading it. If they read, or if worst case scenario, about counting how many publications you have and who your advisor is. But I think what's important is to deliver a good presentation that's professional, competent, articulate, and it's okay to say this is early stage work, and then present the early stage work, because that's what conferences are. I think is an opportunity to get feedback, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Now, oftentimes the feedback gets pretty bad, but sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's excellent, actually. So I think submitting earlier stage is great. I think when you're presenting it, just make sure you let them know, here, this is something early stage, or this is an idea I'm working on. The more senior you get, the more you can get away with that stuff. But I don't know, if I were on the job market and this was the year I was on the job market and interviewing, I would make sure I presented work that was fairly well developed, right? Just to put my best foot forward. Yeah. If I was on the job market that year, right? Just in case my future employer was watching, and then I'd make sure I really did a good job rehearsing that presentation. I was really entertaining. The one thing is, these conferences, we academics do such a horrible job presenting. We are horrible presenters. We don't, we go up there and we drone on about ourselves, right? Instead of the idea, and we drone on about what we did. And that's not that interesting. It kind of is if someone's really interested in your work and they overlap a lot with exactly what you do. But for the most part, we're not focused on the audience and gaining their interest and provoking their thinking. And I think we as a field could do a lot to improve our ability.
So I want to give slightly different recommendations from you, because number one, from what I know, if you're on the job market, the prospective schools where you send the application, when they're interested, they come watch you present. Like, they use that opportunity saying, I'm going to look at this candidate. They don't even know that I'm in the audience, but I'm going to have a look at them. And I agree with you that it's not about the research. They will have read that, or they will read this, but they want to see you be on stage, present.
They'll invite you out for a job talk.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's really important. So how you present that is really important. And the other difference is I would not take my most mature research. I would take the one where I think the idea is the best or the most interesting. I want to present an idea. Because what do you want to have? You want to have the guy that's really good with partial least squares analysis and has done it already and can show you the coefficients, or you want to have the guy that comes up with a better idea than Tam? That's interesting. I mean, that's more interesting than, I've already done the statistics, and guess what? It's 12.
But what I think you're saying is you want to showcase what you do very well, right? So you want to take something that you think is the most interesting, that you can be the most enthusiastic about, and that you can field questions from a position of knowledge, right?
Okay, I want to extrapolate from that. So Carol, you're no longer a PhD student, right? So that means you had a job talk, you had probably an interview when you went to a campus visit or something like this, right? So you gave a presentation, right? Do you feel that was a crucial thing when you gave a presentation during a faculty visit or a campus visit?
Yeah, I think it was practice. Yeah, I think at the conference, practicing the job talk, even at my own university, having sessions among our department to practice. And I think that was, what Nick mentioned about how you present yourself, the ideas that you're talking about, more than maybe which particular paper. And if I already used PLS, and less about reading off the coefficients on the table, and so the department really kind of pushed me to have a good presentation.
Carol, are you Canadian?
No.
Because you said a vote.
Oh, did I? I'm Bostonian.
Oh, you're Bostonian.
Well, that's close enough. So, that's the point I wanted to make, Carol, because I've been on a few hiring committees, obviously now in Europe, where, people send in their applications and they get ranked, usually in terms of counting numbers, publications, citations, that sort of stuff, how many A hits they have and blah, blah, blah. And then they get invited, and they invite a few people to these visits, right? And they come and visit and give a presentation. And I find it amazing how many of the applicants always underestimate the importance of these presentations. Many people that I think come in and say, like, hey, I'm going to present this best paper, fourth round management science, and the paper speaks for itself. Well, maybe so. That's what got you to the interview and to the presentation, but the presentation sucks. And what I've seen happen a lot is that the people that give a bad presentation, they don't get hired. Very simple. Yeah. You can really jump from being the first on the list to the last on the list if you don't do a good job in this presentation. And then obviously the Q&A with the faculty. That's so super important. And people don't, they don't prepare. They give a lackluster presentation. Another horrible mistake is they don't look up what the faculty members are doing. I'm sitting there and I want to see how can I work with this guy when he's here. And he doesn't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, dude,
at a job talk, that's the worst.
Yeah. Do you want to work here for the next 20 years? You want to collaborate? They all give you they looked up your keywords, but be a little bit prepared and know what everyone's interested in. And
so we should have a future podcast on going to the job market and doing job talks or that sort of thing. But we have another question from Long Win. Thank you so much for your podcast series. I've been learning a great deal. Couple questions. When in your early career, Recker, did you start collaborating with researchers, including PhD students or scholars, external of where you got your PhD? And upon reflection, what's your advice to PhD students to kickstart collaboration? My assumption is that conferences are a good place to start knowing people and we may end up working with, but not sure how to approach it efficiently. Yeah, these are good questions about how do you strike up that collaboration with a peer. I'll tell you a story about one of my great collaborations early was with a guy named Jae-Gul Lee. And he's a PhD student at the time at Carnegie Mellon, and I was at Case, and he's a professor at Wayne State now in Michigan. But he had a data set that was like crazy. He hand-coded automotive patents for 2 decades, right? And we were talking at a conference. We actually went for a little run together. We became friends. Our kids are about the same age. And I'm like, dude, that's gold that you're sitting on those hands. And he's like, well, what can we do with it? Because I was coming to it from the theory standpoint. He had all this data. So we had 2 papers, one in org sci, one in research policy that we did together that were basically taking my ideas of what I would do, because I'm giving him ideas on what I would do. And he's like, all right, so do it. You frame it, I'll get the empirics together, and we'll write a couple of these papers. And we did. And we started those before we finished our PhDs, right? So I don't think there's any time. You don't have to wait. If you find someone, you think there's a way to click, you just do it. My first MISQ paper is with Jacqueline Pike, who's now at Duquesne University, and Sean Hansen, and then Patrick Bateman. All four of us were PhD students, and we just did a collaboration because we kind of met each other at a conference.
World's paper, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, my story is similar. I mean, in second year PhD, I contacted Jan Mendling, who is a computer scientist, and he worked in a similar area, and he was a PhD student at that time, and he was on a similar thing. And I said, hey, I know you're doing this, I'm doing this. I think we should work together. And it happened to be just, I don't know, a couple of months out from some conference. And he said, well, are you going to go to this conference? And I said, yeah. And so we met. And it was one of these things where, you go, it's like, are you Jan? Are you Jan? So like, okay, that's it. We went for a walk together. We liked each other. We became friends and wrote about, I don't even know, 30 papers together all up. So it was just
So you and Mendling weren't like friends first? You actually met each other professionally? I just assumed there was like a deeper history there or something.
No, he worked on configurational stuff, and he had a very nice formalization through XML schemas, and I worked on configuration without the schema. Anyway, so I thought, what you're doing is really good for what I'm doing. Let's do something. And then we met, had a coffee or whatever, and then started doing this together. I think the key answer is just approach people. Yeah. Just approach people. Obviously, conferences are a good place because people tend to go there, and that's an easy place to meet. But sometimes it just takes an email.
Did Jan Mendling, did he graduate his PhD around the time you did yours, or early?
Yeah, he's a bit older, so I think he graduated a year or two earlier.
Yeah, so around the time. Okay.
Yeah,
now for those he's in computer science, so people might not know him, but he is the Einstein chair at Humboldt, right? So he's got a big chair in Germany. Yeah, he's about our. That's just it. It was your peer. You got to be friends based on whatever, running into each other, and then you end up collaborating together, right? Yeah.
And I think that's how I usually do it. If I start collaborating with someone, I usually say, let's write a little conference paper together. Nothing big. I'm not going to go and say, let's do this big funded 5-year investigation. Let's just work on a paper together to see whether we click, right? Whether you and I can work together. Funny enough, Nick and I, we did that too, right? After we met, we said, let's write a little paper together. It was a horrible experience. I swear to God, it was so arduous to write with you. And the paper got rejected.
Why was it a horrible experience? That was a wonderful experience.
I really didn't like it. And we had our paper rejected at Higgs, which has a higher acceptance than rejection rate.
Right. Why was it a horrible experience? What is your problem here exactly?
You're not structured and timely enough. You were just all over the place. I just didn't like it.
Oh God.
I was young.
All right. I think we had some wonderful ideas in that paper.
That is true. We never worked on them.
All right. Well, this is awful. So I found out I'm a bad collaborator from Wrecker over here.
I said you were. And then the funny thing is what happened with Nick and me, that people started throwing us together in the mix to do all sorts of things. Like we were both asked to do, I don't know, track sharing, editorial work, and other things that I don't even remember. So we had to work together. All right.
All right, so we don't have any questions in the Q&A, and we're at the 40-minute mark. So Sarah and Carol, what do we think? We wanted to kind of cut this a little bit short, didn't we?
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. So I think Sarah has some additional questions, or we might have only time for one or two. But Sarah.
So maybe I think we covered a bit of the conferences and maybe rejections a bit. Maybe something about service work. So what were the first experience of service work you had? And did you like it? Was it a good decision at that moment, maybe as a PhD?
So maybe I'll start. I come from a sort of tradition in IS engineering, I suppose. And what's really common there is that you start organizing and maybe even creating your own workshop series. Yeah. So you start trying to get into program committees of conferences and do review work there. But then these events always have satellite workshops. And for some reason, it was always a thing that you go and create your own workshop series. You find one or two guys, usually, early career scholars, and then you create a workshop. So you submit it to a conference, you get a call for paper hours, you get about 10, 20 submissions, you organize it, you run it, etc. Which is a fair bit of work, I suppose, but it's really good for networking again, right? Because that's how you meet people, and you meet people that are interested in exactly the same little thing. Yeah. So in my particular case, it was around, I created one for a couple of years that was around empirical research in an engineering topic. No engineer does empirics, and I did, and I wanted to figure out who else does it. And that's how I met people. And then from there, your network grows and your standing grows and so forth. So that's always a good thing to do. So that was my experience in getting involved in service work as a doctoral student. And later, I guess it became more as a typical journal reviewer route that leads to more duties.
Yeah. So for me, the reviewers, the first service work I did was just a bunch of reviews for people. A lot of them were with Kale, my advisor, and Young Jin Yu, right? They would just send me their reviews. So I would do that. But I think that's how people start to appreciate you. If you do a really nice job reviewing, and they're like, wow, that was a nice review. Then they ask you to do a journal next time. They ask you to do whatever. And then they start trusting you. And then you get editorial work and you get a bit of a reputation then. And the other important thing to doing reviews is if you do the reviews and you do a good job, I think you get the benefit of the doubt when, as an author, you send your work to that person. If you were reviewed for conferences, you reviewed journals with them, and you did a good job, and then you send it as an author, they think, oh, maybe they give you the benefit of the doubt because they realize that, the editor realizes, yeah, this person knows what they're doing. So I think reviewing is the primary way you're going to do service. But the other thing, and you didn't mention this, Recker, is special interest groups. And maybe this is kind of what you meant with but there are these SIGs. Like now there's this new SIG DITE, right? Digital Innovation, Transformation and Entrepreneurship that we started a couple of years ago. And it's nice for the more senior people, but I think it's really nice for the junior people because then they meet each other. And you want to look for those situations where, sure, you can maybe meet a senior person or two, but I think really networking with folks at your career stage, the special interest groups are great, and they're great for getting your name out there in that domain. Make it a special interest group in something that you're actually interested in. So if you're interested in sustainability, do the green IS one, right? If you're interested in qualitative research, you might consider the grounded theory one, right? So they have all these special interest groups, and their niche, make sure it's something that you actually do. And then I think that's a great place to kind of narrow it down and meet those people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, back then the SIGs were not that many and they weren't that active. That's what I remember. I remember being a member of 2 SIGs and they never did anything. The modern SIGs like SIG Phil and SIG GTM and SIG Diet and SIG HCI and so on, they're really active and they do a lot of things throughout the year. And they're really great places, absolutely. So we do have another question here from Bavia Shroff. Thanks for the discussion. What would be your advice on the following? What would be your advice for how to approach the first journal paper submission and on various aspects like choosing the journal, persisting through rejections, etc.? Nick, with your track record, I think you should handle that one.
Well, all right. So you have some sense of, so first off, if you're going to go to MISQ, IS, a top tier journal, you need someone that has published in that journal to look at it. All right. Too often, and I get these at MISQ, and I'm sure you do as well, Recker, these folks, they didn't polish it up enough for MISQ. And then we tend to do a desk reject. You want to avoid the desk reject, and you want to get past that and and the way you do that is to have a nicely polished paper. And sometimes you're missing the fundamentals, which even if you're an experienced author, you miss the fundamentals. Getting that external set of eyeballs really helps. So that's what I would suggest is don't send half-baked stuff to a journal. Get some people you trust to read it over and catch those things that we all miss. We all miss the very basics. The stuff that I, as an editor or a reviewer, catch on other people's, I will miss on my own papers, right? Because you're too invested. It's too close to you, right? But then they'll tell you and you'll be like, oh, okay, I need to do that. My problemization, my motivation's bad. Just a very fundamental. So you need that, right? So you want to do friendly reviews. You want to do workshops. You want to get those people you trust to review it for you. So that's if it's an important paper, because you only get really usually a shot at each journal. And we have two super premier journals, right? MISQ and ISR. So you're only going to get a shot at each. And chances are you're going to get the same reviewers. If you send your paper at MISQ and they reject it, and then you turn around and send it to ISR, you have a very high chance of getting some of the same people on it. And if you didn't change it between the two, they're going to really hammer you. So that's the one bit of advice, is get people to look at it first and make sure that there's nothing, like some people will give you this advice of, well, keep it in there to give the reviewers something to complain about, and then you can fix it in a future revision. That's really bad advice. Make it the best you can make it and then submit. So even if it takes a little bit of time, I would do that. The other thing is make sure you find the editors that, do your type of thing and send it to the journal that has those editors, right? It doesn't help if you have this great, qualitative paper, sending it to management science or something, right? There aren't that many qualitative editors or anybody on the editorial board that can handle it at management science, right? So they might say they want qualitative work. They might be open to it, but there aren't that many editors there that can even handle such work. So you have to pick the right editor. Editors matter so much. That's the other thing I would do when I'm submitting a paper. And then I would cite the appropriate people. Keep in mind, when they take your paper, this is what a lot of editors will do. They'll look at the intro. They'll look at the first 2 paragraphs of your introduction and see who you cite. Oh, you cite Recker here? Okay. They might not even think about it too much, and they'll go ask Recker. They'll be like, yeah, this person cites you a lot. Can you handle this for me, or something like that, right? Or if they don't ask because the person cites them a lot, they might just, so be careful, be intentional about who you're citing when you're motivating your paper, because oftentimes those are the people they're going to ask to review the paper. Persisting through rejections. Yeah, well, that's the name of our game, right? We're every field, a bunch of critics, they want to tear your paper apart, and you're going to get rejected. Your beautiful work will get rejected. Certainly your bad work will get rejected, and you just got to figure it out, realize. So this is the one thing I would say about persisting through rejections, Recker, is oftentimes when I get a rejection or someone criticizes me, I think, well, they're not as smart as me and they just don't get it, and screw them, right? And the older I get, the more I realize, well, you know what? If they're seeing this problem, it's probably my fault, right? If they have this objection and they don't see what the implication is, and it's probably because I didn't spell it out for them. And you really have to spell it out for them. And then before you revise it and send it somewhere else, make sure you take responsibility for that, because if they have that impression, that's your fault for not handling it, right? So you want to you want to lash out, but keep in mind that if they had that objection, so will others, and you might want to get ahead of it as you revise.
And there's a few tricks up your sleeve that you can do, right? So what I do, for example, is when you get an email these days, right? And it usually spells out even in the subject heading on the first line what the outcome is. If the outcome is rejection, I don't actually read further. I don't read the reviews on the first email. I say, okay, that wasn't it. I'll read it tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm going to read it and know the outcome already. Won't be as frustrated. So, because if I read it the first time, I'm already frustrated, my interpretation of the review comments will be biased, will be colored by my frustration. So I literally stop after knowing what the decision is. Even with revision, they're like, okay, I need to revise it. We're going to worry about that later. I found that very helpful because that takes the emotions out of the game. The point about the editors, I think it's key. I think there's 2 aspects to this. Number one, you're not sending a paper to a journal. You're sending a paper to a person. Yeah. And a journal is not one thing. It's a set of editors. And, if there's no one that has an interest in your work or knows this topic area, don't send it to that journal. Like if you look at my publications, there's not a single JMIS paper. And I think in my 20 years, I've submitted that 2 times. It doesn't publish the type of work that I do. And the editors at that journal are not interested in what I'm doing. Journal of Strategic Information Systems, same thing. I don't do strategy stuff. Like I'm not going to send my paper there. It's just a horrible fit. So you can avoid that by having a look at who are the editors even, like who's going to possibly read your paper. And not only can I have a look at this, that's a key thing to put in your cover letter. Picking the right SE and AE to say like, these are guys that will like what I'm doing here. And you can make these suggestions. You can also make suggestions who not to pick if for whatever reason you have a bone with someone. That's fine. And sometimes you see cover letters that are just where people don't care who gets their paper. And I'm like, I think that's pretty important. And that's something you can at least, not, you can't control it, but you can influence it. And editors very often try to follow that suggestion. Very simple. If you say, I want to nick my hand on my paper, an editor-in-chief will usually try to give it a nick unless Nick already has 8 papers on his sleeve. Yeah, and then they'll find someone else. But usually that's what they're at least trying to do if constraints permit.
Yeah, I think the thing I would take away from that is that you're not sending it to a journal, you're sending it to a editor or two, right? And then there are also reviewers. And if you can't think of anyone to review your paper, it's like mid-career, you know, you really want to help them by finding those reviewers and naming, these are the 2 people I'd like you to review. Because as an editor, if they recommend 2 people and I look at their records and those people that they recommend as reviewers have actually published in that journal or equivalent journals, then they'll do my work for me. Then I'll go ask those people, please review. So if you know, or if you suspect there are certain folks who will appreciate your work more than others, make sure you list them as reviewers. So I've got to go off to these trio talks, Wrecker.
Yeah,
Carol
great.
and Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think we are at the 5 minutes, so we have to close anyways. Any other questions? Well, we can send it along. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your great insight. I think there was a lot of takeaways Sarah and I had. So we will close up for the Doctoral Student Corner and also do the gift card giveaway now. So, but if you have to drop, Nick, that's okay.
I do have to drop off, but thank you and take care.
Guys, enjoy the conference. Thanks for having us. And everyone interested in the podcast series, the next season will come out in a couple of weeks, I suppose. We have a few episodes recorded. This will be one of them. And, we'll start again soon.
Send your ideas.
Yeah, send your ideas. If you want us to talk about something, just send us an email.